What's up, friends? It's your girl, Millie Peartree. Today, I'm here in the Food 52 kitchen. We're gonna go behind the recipe and make a childhood favorite of mine, hoe cakes. As you guys know, I love a pantry ingredient recipe, and this uses all ingredients that you may have on hand already. You don't have to go out there and buy anything. So it has simple ingredients, cornmeal, of course, the base of hoe cakes. We have some sugar, some salt, and of course, some leveling. So traditionally, hoe cakes don't have leveling in it. It was more dense, but I like a more light, airy hoe cake because today I'm gonna have it for brunch and I want it like nice and fluffy. The first time I had hoe cakes was probably at a church function. I believe we called it Johnny Cakes there, interchangeable name. It was cornmeal, not much sugar, and kind of pan fried like a pancake. Maybe it was for a pancake breakfast. Scott, oh my gosh, thank you so much for meeting with me today. Hoe cakes, what can you tell me about them?
The hoe cakes are also something called Johnny Cakes. And I don't know about you, but I have a Johnny cake in my history from my mom's family from Barbados that isn't at all like what people call Johnny Cakes here in the United States. In the Caribbean, it's made with flour, it's got baking powder, it's closer to a biscuit. But what we're talking about, hoe cakes or Johnny cakes, which are sometimes called journey cakes, were usually a cornmeal cake made from flint corn. The most recipes track it back to Rhode Island flint corn in the 1750s. It in part comes out of indigenous traditions of parching corn or taking, like many of us do with hot water cornbread, where you boil water or scald water and pour it over the cornmeal so it will hydrate it a little bit. The hoe cake name really comes from the idea of people who were enslaved using the back of a hoe set over a dying fire and using that the way we would use a skillet or a plancha or flat iron grill. I mentioned journey cakes. Johnny cake to journey cake implies portability, mobility. Some people think it might have been food taken on Underground Railroad. I'm not saying it's not. When you think of having a journey cake, it would mean that you're really on the move or you're in the field. You really don't have a lot of options. And that to sit down and enjoy each other and have hoe cake, journey cake, cornbread is a different experience, or all the way up to spoon bread, where you're really putting a tablecloth on that table and having company come over.
So I have our dry ingredients mixed. I have some buttermilk. Again, traditionally it's used with scalding hot water, but I'm making it a little bit more on the unctuous side. I always have some type of buttermilk in my refrigerator. And I have some eggs here. My milk is already measured, so why not put the eggs inside the measuring dish? And we're just gonna mix this in. I don't recall anybody in my family making this at home. As I mentioned, I had it in church a couple times, but I make it for myself when I make a big pot of collard greens. I always say collard greens and cornbread or hoe cakes is the equivalent of tomato soup and grilled cheese. So what it does is sops up all of that briny, delicious goodness from collard greens. So it's like a one pot meal. Often collard greens are served as a side, but I'll just eat it as my main on a nice cold day, with some hoe cakes on the bottom. So now we have our dry ingredients, and I'm going to add my buttermilk and my eggs to my dry mixture. So once your liquid is combined with your dry, you're looking for a runny batter, similar to pancake batter. No lumps, just nice and smooth. I'm gonna let our hoe cake batter rest a little bit. It's totally optional, but it does help with the rising of the batter when we go to put it in the pan. But in the meantime, between time, I'm gonna clean up a little bit, or we're gonna flip on over to Scott, and he's gonna tell you traditionally how some of these hoe cakes are served.
Today, because it's become a chefy thing, and we have a variety of black chefs and white chefs who are looking back to history, you might see it on a brunch menu and have the kinds of things like sorghum, hickory, shagbark hickory, cane, or maple syrup or honey. The hoe cakes we're talking about were really savory. And so they would a stew, and the hoe cake became like fufu, a way for us to have a carbohydrate that captured the flavors in the stew or broth and gave us a little bit of substance in what we're eating if we had a meager meal. If you have it, you might add egg. You could sweeten it. Butter as opposed to lard or in addition to it. Milk or clabber, aka buttermilk. Bits of ham or streakoline or salt pork in it. And the most simple base recipe, cornmeal, water, usually hot water to make the cornmeal bloom, salt and fat, usually lard. What I just enumerated are what is commonly used in slave rations. So that would fit into the rations you would have gotten as an enslaved person. The ability to add all these other inclusions either means you have some economic agency and or you want to have a celebratory meal and you've saved in some way or pilfered ingredients to get them if we're talking about people who were indigent or enslaved. And we know, for example, that George Washington, he loved to slabber soft butter and honey on his hoe cakes. So it was something that was also eaten by white elites, not just enslaved people.
So I added some vegetable oil to the pan. In some cultures, they add like some bacon fat or some lard. If you have olive oil, you can totally use that. I wouldn't necessarily use butter because those milk solids might burn. So here we go, we're gonna get into the pan. We're gonna make this the same way you would make possibly a pancake. We're not gonna overcrowd the pan. Kind of just gonna section them off a little bit. We're gonna wait for bubbles to form, get them crispy around the edges, and then we're gonna go for a flip. I just pulled my final hoe cake from the pan. As you see, I have plates of hoe cakes for everybody. This is mine. This is for when I get a man. That's gonna be his portion. And this is whoever else gonna come over. As you learn, historically, hoe cakes are served savory. This is one of my favorite ways to serve it with some butter and some maple syrup, but it's equally delicious as a base with some collard greens. I'm not gonna talk any longer. I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna eat. Damn, that's good. It's not quite a pancake, but it's not quite cornbread. It's the perfect balance of something that's reminiscent to any traditional soul food meal. I would say try this anyway, whether or not you have it my way with some butter and syrup, or if you use it as a base for any of your savory meals. I'm hoping you try this recipe. Thank you so much for coming behind the recipe with me as we made this delicious recipe, hoe cakes, and you can find it on Food 52.